Okay, hello everyone, welcome to Aquajardin. It's an amazing honour to be here. Thank you, Ed, for inviting me. Thank you to OASE for supporting this event. Thanks everyone for coming. I know some of the people have come from quite a distance. It's really great to see you, and it's great to have this opportunity for me to share my passion of aquascaping with you all. So hopefully you'll learn some stuff today. Please feel free to ask me any questions during the demonstration. I'll be here till 4 p.m, so this will probably take a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours or so. I'm very happy to have any willing volunteers as well to help with planting, so feel free to offer your services. Just a little bit about myself. My name's George Farmer. Some of you may know me from YouTube and PFK magazine, and I'm very blessed to basically have a career doing my hobby. Very, very fortunate, and I absolutely love it. I travel all over the world. I was in America last week, Denmark yesterday, Gloucester today, and then back to America next week. Writing a book, so look out for that as well, big plug. And yeah, find me on YouTube, Instagram. You can find me, if you don't know who I am and my work, you can quite easily see it on the internet. Aquascaping for me is more than a hobby, actually. It's almost a way of life. I find it very therapeutic. I think it's a beautiful thing to have in your home. And it's a little bit different to a regular fish tank. You know, what we're doing is creating an underwater slice of nature and art. You know, we're combining compositional guidelines, we're combining nature, we're design, technology. All these things combined together help create something that's really beautiful to look at, beautiful to live with, and even just the act of sitting down and just taking time out to enjoy your aquascape. This is really important, and it's something I actually don't tend to do enough of. So one of my New Year's resolutions next year is going to be just chill out a bit and enjoy your own aquascapes. What we're going to create here today is, we'll talk about the equipment in more detail later. But you can see already we've got some really strong hardscape. This is the nature aquarium kind of concept. So the nature aquarium philosophy was invented by a guy called Takashi Amano, a Japanese gentleman who sadly passed away 2015. Absolute kind of godfather of modern aquascaping. And he came up with this concept of using elements of nature from outside and transferring those into the aquarium. So we're not necessarily directly copying scenes from nature like mountainscapes or seascapes, etc., but we're using these natural elements and then bringing them into the aquarium space. So this is a great example here with the hardscape here, the rocks, the natural rocks and the woods. You wouldn't necessarily see this particular kind of design in nature, but it's using natural materials in a way that invokes this real kind of sense of nature. And we can use lessons from nature to help create a really kind of nicely balanced aesthetic impact. So we'll talk more about that in more detail later. Aquascaping, nature aquarium, it's my favourite style of aquascaping because for me it just helps to connect with nature. I think in today's society, you know, a lot of us work behind computer screens all day. A lot of us are kind of glued to our phones. We're addicted to the screen. And I think, you know, modern humans, we're kind of detached a lot from nature, especially if we live in an urban environment. And, you know, I really believe in the therapeutic value of aquascaping. I think it can help reconnect us with nature. And for that reason, you know, I really encourage you guys to perhaps explore it a little bit more. You might have an aquascape already at home. You might be brand new to the hobby, but I'd really encourage you to, you know, really pursue it. Really, hopefully you'll gain a lot of inspiration and tips and tricks from today to help you further your own hobby. Like I said, just ask me any questions throughout the demonstration, and also at the end, if you're a bit shy, come and find me one-to-one. That's perfectly fine as well. But it's just a beautiful hobby, and it's, you know, for me personally, it's actually kind of fulfilled my kind of purpose in life. You know, I used to be in the military. My last tour of duty was bomb disposal in Afghanistan. I got blown up in a roadside bomb, and I thought, well, I think I should do something different, you know, and I was already kind of writing for magazines, and I thought, you know, I'll take it to the next step. I'll become a kind of self-employed aquascaper, and then this was sort of 5 years ago, and then here we are today, me rambling on about aquascaping to you guys. So a bit of background, a little bit about aquascaping. Let's crack on with the actual practical demonstration, shall we? So this is an OASE HighLine 400. So I work very closely with OASE. They support me. I do a lot of work with them in the UK, Germany, and the US. Well-known pond company, but they're branching out massively, investing massively into the indoor market. One of their kind of top-line products is this HighLine aquarium. It is a premium product. The quality is amazing. I've got one of these at home. I've been working on these for a couple of years, and it's one of the most well-built, well-engineered aquarium systems out there. It does have a hood. As an aquascaper, I tend to prefer open-top, rimless aquariums, but from a practical point of view, a hood is great. It helps prevent evaporation. So in an open-top aquarium, the water will evaporate, and if you live in a hard water area in particular, you'll get a kind of hard water mark building up around the rim. Some of you may have experienced this already. Also, with an open-top tank, you can have the risk of jumping fish, or Amano shrimp in particular. They like to kind of climb out for some reason. So obviously a hood helps to prevent that. It also helps to prevent heat loss, so you're going to use less energy maintaining the temperature of the aquarium. And actually, it looks great. You know, it kind of frames the aquarium. So we've got the black silicone here. Rimless tanks tend to have clear silicone. Actually, one of the advantages of black silicone is that it won't show up any algae. If you have to use any fish medications, it won't stain. So the black silicone is good for that. It has a black background already fitted, so you don't have to put, you know, sometimes you might have to put the black foil on the back, and then you can get air bubbles, and, you know, it looks a bit unsightly, whereas this has kind of prefabricated black background. It also has a drilled bottom there, and you can just see, some of you might, if you can see the filter inlet here, this is drilled through the base of the aquarium. So this draws in water through the strainer there, and then you have the outlet that comes up through this, what we call a dry weir. So this box in the left-hand corner, this is kind of a waterproof section. So you can actually have the filter outlet that comes up through there. You have the spray bar, which you can't probably see, but if you duck underneath, you can see the filter spray bar along the left-hand edge here. And then you can actually have the lighting cables coming up through here. So what this means is there's no cables on display. There's no cables running behind the aquarium. So you can actually have the aquarium right up to the back wall as well. So if you're living in a bit of a, you know, you might have a smaller living space, space is a premium, you want to get that aquarium right up, butted against the wall, then you can do that with this system. It's a composite material, the doors, the hoods, this is I think it's stainless steel or aluminium, do you know, Stephen? Aluminium, so it's not going to rust or anything. Really nice kind of brushed finish, so it looks really classy. I think it's available in 3 different finishes, but very modern. Will fit in with most kind of living spaces. And this is the biggest version, the 400 litre. They do a 125 litre, which is a cube here. They do a 175, which some of you may have seen on my channel, which is a little bit longer. They do a 200, a 300, and the 400 as well. And they are releasing another line of aquariums for a kind of lower price point as well, so look out for that in the future. It also has, the hood is kind of push to release, so it goes up like this, and that will just rest there, no problem. It's fitted with new kind of premium lights, which are Wi-Fi controlled, so you can control the spectrum. It's got lots of presets, and you can individually kind of control it to your own kind of taste. And you can control the intensity, and I think you control the photo period as well, so when it comes on and off, so kind of fully automated. We've got 2 units in here, which is perfect because we're going to be growing, obviously, aquarium plants, and aquarium plants tend to thrive with higher levels of lighting, especially if we're going to be using CO2 injection, which I'm sure the guys will be here. What else can I tell you? That's pretty much it. It does have a kind of really cool feeding slot here for the fish, so you don't actually need to undo the hood. So you just pop your food in there, close that off, and just a really, really stylish, high-end premium product. So highly recommended. I love my HighLine 175. I'm not just saying that because OASE support me. It is genuinely a really good product. So something to consider if you are in the market. Okay, so let's move on to the aquascaping. But before I do that, is there any questions on the actual system itself? Hi, Andy. Anyone? No? Good. Okay, so aquascaping. We've talked a little bit about the hardscape already. I think Ed created this for us already. But it's worth talking about the hardscaping process. So the hardscape is the natural materials that we're using. We're using mini landscape rock or Siriu stone, which is this beautiful grey stone here. It's actually quite limestone heavy, so it will potentially increase your pH and hardness somewhat. Is it soft water here or hard water? Is it hard? Okay, so the harder your water, the less impact this will have because the water's already kind of buffered. If you live in a soft water area or you use reverse osmosis water, then this will have more impact on the water chemistry. It will boost your pH and hardness a little bit, so do bear that in mind. Beautiful stone. You can see it's got lots of character. It's got these gouges in there. It's got these areas where we can attach plants, which we'll do later. And what Ed's done is come up with a really nice kind of natural design where he's used the strata, the natural kind of lines in the stone, pointing towards this kind of focal point here. So this kind of trunk area here, this is the main focal area, and you might notice it's about a third of the way along into the aquarium. And we call this the rule of thirds. This is a really useful guideline for when we're composing our layout. So if we put that directly central, the risk is that we could have too much symmetry. So there'd be open space to the left, open space to the right. They'd be quite equal. And then your eyes would be darting left to right and they wouldn't settle down. By shifting it over by about a third, it's much more aesthetically balanced. So that's why we use these rule of thirds. Some of you might have a camera phone and it automatically comes up with a grid. And this is the rule of thirds. So when you're top tip, when you're taking a photo, if you line up your focal point, the subject of your photo up where those lines intersect, you'll automatically be using the rule of thirds. Okay. So that's the Siriu stone or the mini landscape rock. I'm not sure what the guys call it here. And then we have a beautiful piece. I think it's just the one piece of Redmoor root. This is a really popular wood in aquascaping. You can see this is a particularly beautiful piece. Looks like a tree trunk with the kind of roots coming down. Invokes this really kind of natural feeling. I really like this. It does have a sawn off kind of section at the top there, which you can see looks a little bit artificial, a little bit man-made, but we'll dress that with plants later on, and it will really kind of give this the illusion that it's been there for many years and looks really natural and mature and not artificial. Okay. So that's the hardscape. If you're a beginner aquascaper, one of the top tips that I recommend is to really invest in your hardscape. So don't be afraid to buy more than you need. Don't be afraid to go really bold with it. A lot of people will just, they'll only kind of fill the height up to sort of here and they have all this open space here. And then you really need to rely on the plants to create the impact, which can take a long time for the plants to grow, and it just doesn't look as good. If we start off with a really strong hardscape layout, which we've done here, then it's really quite easy, much easier to create an impressive aquascape. So when you're buying your hardscape, buy more than you need, make sure it's big enough, and then when you get home with it and you've got your empty tank, just have a really good play around with it. Spend hours, days, weeks, just having a good old play. When the aquarium's dry, you're not disturbing anything, and just enjoy the process. Just put the rocks in, put the wood in, or just the wood, or just the rocks, depending on what layout you want to do. And just experiment. You'll soon know if it looks good or not. Once it looks good and you think, oh, that looks really nice, think to yourself, can I make that look any better? Just do little tweaks, add a little bit, take a little bit out, and then just keep repeating this process until you think you can't make it look any better. Sometimes this will, not being big-headed, but I can do it in a few minutes now because I've done so many. If you're a beginner, I remember when I did my first ever iwagumi layout, it was just a small 30-centimetre aquarium, and I had 3 stones, and it took me a week to compose these 3 stones. Just because every time I did it, I knew it wasn't quite right, and I just keep tweaking it, rotate that stone there, move it over there, swap it over with that one. There's infinite kind of permutations, there's infinite possibilities. So, arguably you could keep doing it forever, but you'll kind of, when it clicks, you'll kind of know. And then even when you think you know, just have a little bit more of a play. Maybe take a photo of when you think it looks great, and then you can go back to that if you've kind of messed it up and you can't remember what you've done. So, the lesson here is take your time with the hardscape. Buy enough of it, make sure it's big enough, high impact enough, and take your time when you're actually composing it. Another top tip is we tend not to mix the different types of wood and rocks. So you'll see here we're only using one type of stone. If we mixed it up with some dragonstone or another kind of texture or colour of stone, it's not going to look natural. And what we're trying to do here today is create a nature aquarium to make it look as naturalistic as possible. And the same kind of principle with the wood. We tend not to mix the different types of wood up, so we help to keep this kind of strong theme, natural appearance. That's the hardscape covered. It will want to float. This wood is going to want to float, so we'll probably temporarily put a stone on it before we fill with water. I've done a couple of demos and the wood's floated, even though it's really embarrassing, so that's not going to happen today. Good. Okay, so we've done the hardscape. Next step is to install our substrate. We have a little bit of tropical soil there in the background. We've got some more over there. So let's put that in. Not sure if I need that or not. That's fine. So let's talk about the soil. Tropical soil, I've used this in probably over 100 aquascapes now. Proven performer. Really consistent in terms of its nutrient content. Some other competitors, you can get you'll buy one batch and it will have super high nutrients, and you'll buy another and it won't be so good. But this is super stable. It's actually mined from quarries in Japan. And it's a kind of concentrated clay-based pellet that's been baked and kind of round into sort of small balls. Like I said, contains nutrients. It also has a high cation exchange capacity. That means that it actually takes in nutrients from the water, locks it into the soil, and then makes those nutrients available to the plant roots. And it's almost like a self-sustaining kind of balancing thing. So the less kind of nutrients you're adding into the water, the more the plants will take from the soil, and vice versa. If you're adding a lot of liquid fertilizers to the water, the less nutrients the plants will take from the soil. So what I like to do is actually use this in conjunction with a good liquid fertilizer, and then the nutrient content of this will last a lot longer. So that's another top tip for you. Most soils will last a good couple of years at least. It does tend to kind of decompose slightly into a bit of a muddy sludge type material, which is actually no problem unless you have particularly kind of active ground-dwelling fish, or you'll want to kind of swap your plants over and hardscape over all the time. So do bear that in mind. But if you just want to leave the layout and kind of mature on its own slowly, and even if you do kind of create a lot of cloudy stuff in the water, just do a huge water change and you'll have no problem. The trouble is if you disturb the soil excessively in a mature setup in particular, what can happen is a lot of the nutrient content from the soil, a lot of the waste organics will escape into the water column, get around the water, and this will basically give you an algae trigger. So whatever you do, if you do end up clouding the water, follow it always up with a huge water change. That's a top tip for you. So comes in 2 kind of types. There's the normal type, which is a grain size of about 4 millimeters, And there's the powder type as well, exactly the same product, just a much smaller grain size, about 1 to 2 millimeters. I like to use the powder type in nano aquariums, where you tend to use smaller plants, and you want to help create the sense of scale. And also for fine, delicate rooted plants, the powder type tends to be easier to plant into. This is a 9-litre bag. It also comes in 3-litre bags as well, if you've got a nano aquarium. Tropica also produce root capsules, which will help to target feed plants, in particular, kind of heavy root feeding plants, such as Cryptocoryne species or Echinodorus. Any plant with like a really kind of robust root structure will absolutely benefit from additional nutrients. So root capsules are a great idea. I'm not sure if we've got any to show you right now, but they're basically like a gelatin capsule with tiny little balls in there which contain lots of nutrients. You put these in with your tweezers. You want to put them at least kind of 2 to 3 centimeters under the surface of the soil, near the plant roots, and then the plants will get extra benefit from those nutrients. So I'm just going to pour this in, try not to make too much mess. In fact, I'm going to use this.
Do you ever use substrate first, or do you always just...
I always just use the soil generally. If you want to create like a really steep banking, which you can do with this soil, I forgot to mention actually, another great advantage of this soil, it's really heavy, I'm not going to hold it for that long. The soil itself is really kind of porous. So I don't know if most of you may have seen the soil, but it's actually like a really porous structure, which helps to allow for really easy root penetration. It's really light, and because of its porous structure as well, it helps to, it creates a really great home for beneficial bacteria. It's really great for colonizing bacteria. A lot of the biological filtration in an aquarium with soil will occur in the soil itself and through the plant growth as well. Okay, another bag. Where did I put that? There we are. I forgot to mention also the soil does help to, it reduces the pH slightly, normally buffers it around about 6.5, also reduces the hardness of the aquarium. Because of this really high cation exchange capacity, it will actually bind a lot of the ions from the water, which will actually soften it slightly. So if you live in a hard water area, it's really beneficial. Most plants, and in fact most fish, will benefit from slightly softer water. So it's a really great product for that reason as well. Okay, I normally like to slope the soil to the rear slightly. This helps to create a sense of depth, an optical illusion that the aquarium is actually deeper than it really is. Okay, we've got a soil flattener here. You can use a paintbrush, you can use one of these, or a credit card, or your hands. But I've got a fancy tool, so I'm going to use it. There isn't really an optimum depth of the soil. As long as there's enough there to anchor the plant roots and the roots are completely kind of covered by the soil, then that's fine. It's more to do with the aesthetics. You want at least a couple of centimetres at the front. The design of the aquarium means that you've got this kind of band, this aluminium kind of band running around the base. So it would be ideal to actually have the soil in line with that band, so you don't kind of see the cross-section like this. This looks a little bit ugly. So we can actually deliberately align that soil with that band, and it will look really, really pretty, well, less distracting, shall we say. Okay, so we need a bit more soil in it. It's not quite deep enough, so we'll do another bag. So the soil is a lot more expensive than, regular sand or gravel, but the benefits are huge versus a gravel or sand. It contains the nutrients, it has the beneficial kind of properties in terms of the water chemistry, the nutrient content, the extra kind of beneficial bacteria, colonisation. It's just, if you kind of want to be serious about growing aquarium plants and aquascaping, then I would consider it almost an essential addition along with your hardscape. So first step, invest in your hardscape, and then next step, get a decent amount of soil, appropriate amount of soil. I was saying about the plants, they'll take in nutrients, food, through their leaves and also through their roots. So what I like to do is kind of spoil the plant, give it nutrients through both. So they get the nutrients through their leaves from a liquid fertilizer, something like this. They do a premium version as well, which is, so the premium doesn't have nitrates and phosphates in, and the specialized does. Nitrates and phosphates are actually a really important nutrient, but they can be created enough by the fish. So if you have a lot of fish and fewer plants, then the premium is good because it doesn't contain extra nitrates and phosphates. If you have loads of plants and CO2 injection, lots of light, and maybe not so many fish, then you'll need the specialized because you'll need those extra nitrates and phosphates. So plants will take in nutrients through their leaves and through their roots. So by feeding them through their roots with a good soil and or nutrition capsules, Tropical also do a nutrition base layer. So you can lay this underneath a sand or gravel. You could even put it underneath here, but it's a little bit of a waste because this is good enough on its own. So by feeding through the roots and the leaves, the plant's going to be really healthy, really robust, and a really healthy plant will kind of fight off algae, basically. Algae is like the number one enemy in the planted aquarium because you've got potentially lots of light, lots of nutrients. This is like a dream for the algae, but we can outcompete the algae with the plants. So by supporting really healthy and fast plant growth with good nutrients, good lighting, good circulation, good CO2 injection potentially, then we kind of create this environment where the plant's growing so healthily, the algae doesn't stand a chance. So for that reason, we also want to plant really heavily, especially in a new aquarium where algae is actually really, really common because there's like imbalances in the biology, etc. So top tip for you, if you're setting up a brand new aquarium or you want to rescape your aquarium at home, then plant really heavily, invest in a good quantity of plants, make sure they're fresh as well. You're very lucky. Aquajardin always have a really nice selection of fresh plants. So we'll talk more about the plants themselves later on when we're planting. So it's going to be kind of a little bit of a triangular layout. So it's going to be taller up here, shallower down here. So we actually want to kind of enhance this effect by deliberately sloping the substrate. So we'll have the substrate taller on the left, shallower on the right. So there's kind of a hollow area under the wood where I couldn't pour the soil, so I'm just trying to kind of push that underneath the wood. We're not going to necessarily plant in that, but okay, time to put our stones back in. So this is a good opportunity to kind of give you a bit of a tutorial on how to position stones. So when we look at a stone, so let's start off with this left-hand piece here. It has these natural lines in it here. Can you see those? This is called strata, and we can use those to our advantage. We can deliberately line up that strata with the main focal area here, which is here, this main trunk. So have these lines kind of pointing towards the kind of main focal area, like so. And then if you partially bury the stone as well, it helps to kind of emphasize this natural look, as if the remember we're doing a nature aquarium where we're transferring this essence of nature from outside into the aquarium. So if you think about a landscape outside where you might find rock formations, often that rock formation has occurred because the land around it has been eroded away. So we can kind of mimic that naturally in here by partially burying the stone and then just offering up the soil around the base of the stone. It just helps it look more natural. So you can see there, I've used the strata and it's in line here. And then let's kind of follow that technique. Also, it's worth pointing out I've deliberately left a gap between this stone and here, and we can plant in between that. And that's going to almost give the effect that this might be one large stone, which is going to help create, again, this natural appearance. Okay, so we've got this stone here. Now, it's worth having a look at the stone properly. So don't just put it in there randomly. Give it some thought. Have a look at the stone in all angles, all axes, and think to yourself, which is the most attractive side? What's going to look the most natural in the aquascape? So if we look at that side there, you can see it's got a real heavy calcium deposit there, this lime deposit, so it's really white. That's going to look really distracting in the aquascape. So we probably want to put that against the soil so we don't see it. So we've decided that we want to use this side. Next step is have a look at the natural strata. A little bit different, this one. It's got strata kind of running all around it. So just think, what's the most kind of dominant strata here, which I think is this central line running down there. And then align that again with your main focal area. So pop that, I'd say, you can either go there, but it's quite close to the glass, and we want to kind of plant around the front. So I'm going to maybe even put it upright like this. And then again, offer your soil up around the base of the stone to help it look really natural. And again, there's a small gap around here. Let's just make sure we can plant in between there, because that is partially buried, this stone on the left. Yeah, so we actually need to move it further away. So there's a gap there that we can plant into. Happy with that? Okay, let's move on to the smaller stones now. Same process. Have a look at the stone. What's the most attractive side that we want to see? We don't want to see that side. It's got that calcium deposit on again. That's really white. This side is actually much more characterful. It's got these gouges. It's got these kind of lines running through it. And again, use the strata. It's kind of got a central line running through there. So let's line up that with the main focal area. Another thing you can do is actually deliberately have the wood running over the stone. This makes it creates this, again, a natural appearance that the root is creeping over the stone, which makes it look, I think, really nice. Okay, again, we've got a gap in between those two stones, which is going to be ideal for planting in between. And again, this, over time, this is going to potentially create the illusion that this might be one stone. So the whole I can see this in 3 or 4 months once the plants are grown in. It almost looks like this is, one coherent piece of rock, if you know what I mean, like on a landslide. And then we've got this kind of tree root just kind of growing over. So, I can visualize how it's going to look, and it's going to look amazing because the guys are going to maintain it brilliantly as well. No pressure. Okay, same principle. Ugly side, nice side, look at the strata, line it up. Okay, 2 more pieces left. Same principle, you know what the score is by now. Last piece. Anyone want to go put the last piece in? Any volunteers? No? Yeah, go for it. That's good. Yeah. What's your name?
Tom.
Tom?
Tom, yeah.
Round of applause for Tom. Perfect. Good. And there's a little bit of room for error because we're going to be planting amongst the stones, and eventually, those plants are going to disguise a lot of it. And this is an important lesson as well. You know, it is really important to get a good hardscape layout to start with, the best you can, but bear in mind that the plants are going to have a huge overall impact on that balance as well. So maybe you're limited in your options for purchasing the hardscape. You might not have access to the best hardscape, although they do have an amazing selection here. We've got another stone here. This looks nice. Is this for the top, maybe? Actually, that's a really nice piece. We need to use that. That's better than this piece. Let's take that out. Yeah, bear in mind the plants are going to have an overall impact. So it is worth kind of planning your layout. I think, you know, you might get inspiration from the internet or scenes from nature, magazines, books. There's nothing actually wrong with copying someone else's aquascape. You know, you're going to kind of, if you know what you like, you know you like that aquascape, then why not copy it? You know, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to learn the basics of how to grow it in, and then once you become more confident in actually how to grow the plants, etc., then you can kind of take it to the next level and start planning your own aquascapes, okay? But definitely have a plan, make a plant list, make a hardscape list, do your shopping, and then really have fun doing it. Take your time with the hardscape. Okay, so that's the hardscape done. I'm happy with that. I think it looks great. We will pop a stone on here before we fill with water, because that no doubt will want to float. And another kind of something to consider with the Redmoor roots, it does tend to build up a lot of fungus on it in the first couple of weeks. Absolutely harmless. You can rub it off with a toothbrush. Some shrimp will eat it. It's just one of those things. It's nothing to worry about. Don't be scared, basically. You can pre-soak the wood. If you have a big enough kind of container, water vessel, then consider pre-soaking it, so it definitely will sink when you actually come around to aquascaping it. Some wood will leach tannins. Different types of woods will leach more tannins than others. So again, don't be afraid. The tannins aren't harmful at all. Some fish actually prefer it. You know, people will actually deliberately use tannins to create like a black water style aquascape, like a biotope, which is basically a replication of a natural habitat. So don't be afraid of the tannins. If you don't like the tannins, you can just simply get rid of them by diluting the water with water changes, or you can use chemical filtration such as activated carbon. The Biomaster filters actually come with, don't come supplied with, but you can buy as an optional extra carbon sponges. So this is the quick release pre-filter, and then you can swap this blue sponge, which is just a standard mechanical sponge, with a carbon sponge as well, which will help get rid of your tannins. And carbon's generally a good thing in a planted aquarium because it just helps to remove organic waste, basically. It will purify the water. There's some kind of argument that it will kind of get rid of liquid fertilizers, but with I like to dose daily, and when you're using a nutrient-rich substrate as well, the carbon that has very, very minimal impact on the plant growth. So don't be afraid to use carbon if you want to. I tend to use it just before like a photo shoot or a video shoot when I want that water to be like gin clear. While we're on the subject of the Biomaster filters, external canister filter, I don't know how many of you are aware of these. These are all I use now on my home aquariums, and when I ever do a private install or a commercial install, I always recommend these. They are, in my opinion, you know, I've tried Eheim, JBL, Fluval, Tetra, all the big brands. This is my favourite. Largely because it's German, so the engineering's amazing. Also, the pre-filter is a game changer. So you can actually clean your filter in a couple of minutes just by taking this out, quick release. You can clean this in the tap, in your kitchen tap water. This isn't biological media, it's purely mechanical. So you can wash this in tap water, no problem. Even if there's a bit of chlorine in there, that's no problem. And it just saves so much time. You don't have to take this apart. I've run one of these now for 2 years. I wouldn't recommend that at home, but I've ran one of these for 2 years just kept this clean, basically, because all of the waste, all of the mechanical waste is being collected here, and it's prevented from entering into the main biological portion in here. So this stays super clean, and all the rubbish gets clogged in there, and then you can clean that out every week, every day if you wanted. Only takes a couple of minutes, and that's, like I said, it's a game changer. Normally it takes half an hour to an hour to clean an external canister if you do it properly, but with one of these, a couple of minutes. Also has, I think it's the thermo version, so it has a built-in heater, so you don't have that ugly heater in the aquarium. You can get external inline heaters as well, but this adds another kind of break in an external inline heater. Basically, you break the hose there and you fit the heater in line with that, but that's another potential area for leaking, another thing to go wrong. So I really like the built-in heater here, just there. So great product. Another really good kind of spec of this tank is that when you want to, should have done it earlier, when you want to clean the filter, slides out like that. Seems a real simple idea, but I don't think any other aquarium brand has that in their cabinet. So, and that just, so, and we lock that there like that. So really simple. If you want to clean the pre-filter, turn it off, obviously at the power, turn the heater off, unlock that, that comes out, clean it in your tap, pop it back in again, lock that, and there you go, filter's maintained. No excuse not to keep your filter super clean. Good. I digressed there a bit on filtration, but I think it's an important topic. Okay, so we've got our substrate in, we've got our hardscape in. Now it's time to plant. Okay, planting. Come up with a planting plan. Make sure your plants are suitable for your aquarium. So if you've got low lighting, you want to stick with easy plants. If you've got high lighting, then you can choose whatever plant you want. You can grow easy plants, obviously, and you can grow advanced plants. Tropica, they have a very easy to understand system. I call it the traffic light system. So they have 3 categories: easy, medium, and advanced. When you look at the labels of any Tropica plant, it will have a colour on there. So for instance, we've got Staragini repens here. It has a green thing here. That means it's easy. And then we've got orange, which means it's medium. And then we've got advanced, which is red. I'm not sure if we've got any advanced today. Basically, the easier the plant is, the less kind of high-tech equipment you need. So an easy plant you can grow with low lighting. You don't necessarily need a soil substrate, although I would recommend it. You can use nutrition capsules. You won't need lots of liquid fertilizer, but I'd still recommend it because it's just going to help keep that plant healthy. You don't need a lot of light, and you don't necessarily need CO2 injection, although I would definitely, again, recommend CO2 injection if you can afford it, and if you want the best plant growth possible, healthiest plant growth possible, less algae, then I would definitely recommend CO2 injection. But it's not essential by any means, especially with the easy category. Medium category plants, they will need kind of a bit more lighting. Definitely would benefit from a nutrient-rich substrate such as the soil. Will definitely more than likely need CO2 injection, and they're just a little bit kind of trickier to grow. Advanced plants, we're talking quite high-end now, high levels of lighting, definitely need CO2 injection, good levels of circulation, nutrient-rich substrate, and a fair amount of liquid fertilizer. And potentially you might need softer water as well. Some delicate species do tend to do better in softer water, so do bear that in mind. So when you're planning it out, first thing to consider is the type of aquarium you've got. What levels of light have you got? That's the number one consideration. Light is the number one kind of driving factor behind plant growth, and then everything else kind of falls behind that. So if you do have high levels of light, you can grow the advanced plants if you wanted. But with the high levels of light becomes more other equipment necessities. So with high levels of light, you need to balance this high level of light with more nutrients and more CO2. The reason for that is if you think about you're hitting that plant with loads of light, and the plant wants to grow really, really fast. For it to grow really fast, it needs more food. If you don't give it enough food, it's trying to grow, but it can't, and it suffers. And a suffering plant is one of the biggest triggers for algae. So this is why you'll find if you have too much light and not enough CO2 or nutrients, you will get algae. simple as that. So do bear that in mind. If you want to upgrade your lighting, you want to buy another unit to add to your current unit, or you just want to upgrade it generally, then do think to yourself, do I need to add more nutrients? Do I need to add more CO2? Potentially, you might even need to add more circulation, because those nutrients, that CO2, needs to reach all of the plants. And the only way it can reach those plants is by circulating that water. So you might even need to upgrade your filter or add an additional power head. There's a couple of displays here with power heads in there. Some of you might not want to invest in another filter, so you can buy a relatively inexpensive power head to get that circulation level up. It's almost like it's a balancing act. The more light you have, the more plant growth you'll get, so you need to feed those plants nutrient-rich substrate, liquid fertilizer, CO2, circulation, and then finally maintenance. We'll talk about maintenance later. But basically, the more plant growth you get, the faster that plant growth, the more waste is being produced. Plants produce waste as well as using nutrients. If that waste isn't diluted with a water change and decent filtration, then you'll get algae again. So I talk about algae loads because it's the number one reason people give up the hobby, and that's the worst thing in the world for me, people giving up the hobby. It's the worst thing in the world for a shop, and it's the worst thing for the hobby. If I can kind of educate people on how to deal with algae, then this is really great, because you want to keep, you're going to have success with your aquarium, you're going to be less likely to give up, and you're going to enjoy looking at your aquarium, so you're going to enjoy your hobby, and that's the number one thing to do. That's why we're here. So always think in the back of your mind, algae is always kind of out to get you, right? So what we need to do is really focus on healthy plants, keeping keeping the aquarium well maintained to promote healthy plant growth, and then by doing that, you're helping to prevent algae. Algae and plants are always in battle with each other. Yeah, the more plant growth, the healthier the plant growth, the less algae you get, basically. Okay. I'm rambling, but I love it. Any questions so far? Yes.
Yeah, I got a question about the fungus. Can you describe how it looks like?
It looks like a white. It looks like white jelly, cotton wool. You'll know it when you see it. Yeah, it's always pretty much always white. Sometimes there's maybe a light brown colour. Quite common on the Redmoor route. But yeah, one technique I've seen, actually a supplier, I was in Chicago last week, and what they do is they actually take all their wood, they put it outside to bake in the sunshine, and that tends to kill all of the whatever causes the fungus. And then, hopefully you won't get the fungus, but it is harmless. It's not going to harm your livestock. It just looks really ugly. And if you don't want to just wait for it to disappear on its own, it'll rub off really easily with a toothbrush. The Tropica 1-2 grow range, these are actually my favourite product group of plants. They're grown in laboratory conditions. Actually, Tropica are one of the only aquarium brands in the world that have their own lab. It's in Denmark, it's in near their main greenhouses, and these are produced in-house. There is a video on the Tropica channel, check it out, How Tropica Grow Plants, I think it's called, that I made. And it's actually quite a exclusive video, because they're really careful about what's filmed in the lab, because it's quite secret about because they do it so well. There's a lot of competitors want to know how they do it. But you can check it out, how they actually grow the plants. So these are grown in labs. They've got technicians. Everyone's kind of sterile. Before you go in there, you have to wash your hands. You have to wear over boots. You have to wear a white coat. You have to wear a hairnet. I think you wash your hands twice, because everything has to be super sterile, because these are grown from tiny little kind of cells. If there's any contamination, then basically it ruins the plant. So it's really important to keep these super clean. The result of that is that it's absolutely guaranteed to be free from any disease, pests. There's no pesticides, no algae, and no snails. So, when you buy a regular kind of potted plant that's been kept in an underwater system, it'll often have snail eggs on there, and then you'll get overrun with snails. My advice, if you want to set up a brand new tank and you want to be absolutely guaranteed not to get any pest snails, is just use these, okay? And then just be careful about if you get another new plant, you always try to start off with brand new 1-2 grow, so if you don't want any pest snails. Some people like the snails, they're not actually that harmful. They don't eat live plants. They only tend to eat decomposing matter. That's a bit of kind of an old school myth that they eat plants. So those are advantages. Another advantage is actually, although it's really small and it looks like you're not getting great value for money because it is so small, there's actually hundreds of individual plants in there. Can you see that really dense kind of root stock there? So you've probably got at least 10 times as many plants in here than you have versus a regular potted plant. So these represent really great value for money. And I would always recommend these versus a potted plant if they have the species available. I think there's about 40 species now available in the Tropical 1-2 grow from all kind of, foreground, mid-ground, background, epiphyte plants, everything you need. You can pretty much get now in the 1-2 grow. And they're developing, they're bringing out new species all of the time. So real big fan of these because of what I said. No snails, no algae, no pesticides, no disease. Pesticides is a potential issue, especially if you keep shrimp and ornamental snails. What happens is when a nursery or an importer imports plants from Asia, by law they have to treat them with pesticides. And these are super toxic to invertebrates because basically the invertebrate is in the same family as a pest. It's an invertebrate. Their pests are invertebrates. So I've seen guys lost thousands of pounds worth of shrimp because they've imported plants from Asia. They've put their plants in their shrimp tank, their shrimp breeding tank, and they've got hundreds of these expensive shrimp. And just because of a tiny amount of pesticide on that plant, it's completely wiped out their entire stock of shrimp. So do bear that in mind. If you want to be guaranteed to be pesticide free, these are the way to go. So when I'm aquascaping, I'll come up with you can come out with like a drawing, a sketch. I've got one in my mind already, and I tend to divide the layout into kind of foreground, background, midground, and background. I usually plant the foreground first, then the midground, then the background. The reason for that is often we'll use kind of tall plants in the back. If we planted them first, they tend to kind of flop over, and then you're going to be restricted where you plant your midground and your foreground. So you start off with your foreground, midground, then background, and then finally I'll attach the epiphyte plants. These are plants that grow attached to your decor. So with that in mind, I am serious about a volunteer if anyone wants to. Yes. What's your name again? Lee, isn't it? Round of applause for Lee, everyone. He's brave enough to volunteer. Have you ever done this before?
Only once.
He's done it once. Excellent. So if you just watch me and then follow along, and then we'll just crack on. So what we'll do, we'll prepare all of these to start with, okay? So take your lid off, if you get one. Yeah. Peel your lid off. Pop that in the bin. Another kind of unique thing about the Tropical 1-2 grow range is a lot of the species are grown in a liquid rather than a jelly. A lot of the tissue culture plants you'll find are grown in like an agar jelly, which is like a gloopy, literally like a jelly, which is actually quite, takes longer to prepare basically. You need to kind of rinse off the jelly. It's a little bit of a faff, but this is super easy. So what we do now, Lee, is we just magically take it out like that, like one clump, and then you'll see a little bit of water in the bottom. What we do is just pop that in there, flick that like that to get rid of all the residue water. So this is like a really nutrient-rich liquid. It's got like growth hormones in, lots of fertilizer. It's basically the food for the plants that have been grown in the laboratory. So we want to get rid, a lot of that. We don't necessarily have to rinse it in water. Arguably, it's going to help the plant grow once it's in the aquarium. Because it is so rich in nutrients, there is some school of thought that it might trigger algae, but I've never had an issue. So that's enough for preparing it. What we do now, is, especially with this plant here, is we peel it open like this. Yeah? And hopefully it will kind of unravel. So this is called Eliocharis mini. It's a dwarf hairgrass. You can see why it's called hairgrass. It will form runners in the aquarium, and you'll end up with a nice kind of solid lawn effect, which looks beautiful. So what we do now, Lee, is we just get a tiny, about a 1 centimetre portion and just tear it off like this, okay? And then just pop it on there. And then we just repeat that process, okay? Happy?
Yeah.
Easy, isn't it? Yeah. So we just do that. Can I leave you to do that? And I'm going to start planting, yeah? Anyone else want to go? It's really easy. Lee will show you. Sharing the knowledge. There we go. Okay, what I'm going to do now is start planting. Well, what's your name, sir?
Dan.
Dan. Round of applause for Dan, everyone. Just going to grab some of these. So what we do now is, if you wanted to, if you want to get the best value for money, you only need to buy, fewer pots, and you can actually divide it as much as you like. You can almost go to like one blade of grass, and there's literally thousands of blades in there. If you wanted to, you could probably plant that whole tank with one pot, although the shop won't be very happy because they want you to buy more pots. Okay, but I tend to use about 1 centimetre portion. And then you definitely need tweezers for this. If you try to use your fingers, you're not going to be able to succeed. You're just going to, when you take your fingers out, the plant's going to come out. You're just going to create a mess. So we get our portion, line it up with our tweezers here. These are a definite investment if you want to get into aquascaping. And then always plant into dry soil. I used to just kind of fill it up a little bit so the soil was wet. But actually now I find that the plants will grip better in the dry soil. And then when we do fill up with water, those plants are going to be less likely to float. So pop your plant in. And there we go, that's it. As long as the roots are anchored to the soil, as long as those roots are in contact with the soil grains, that's absolutely fine. And we'll fill up with water really slowly, and that's going to help avoid any clouding. Hopefully we'll end up with crystal clear water right away. And then we just repeat that process. One of the potential problems you can get is when you put your plant in and you take your tweezers out, sometimes the plant will want to kind of come out with your tweezers. So top tip, if you just pop your finger on top of the plant, take your tweezers out, and then it will stay there.
You can put the tweezers straight down to the bottom of the tank.
You can do, yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter, as long as the leaf is exposed to the water and then the roots are anchored, then that's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter how far down you go. So we just repeat that process. So I want to do, so I'm thinking in my mind, I would, ideally you'd have like a kind of plan, a sketch of where you want to plant, but I've kind of visualised it. So we want kind of hair grass all the way along the front, and then we're going to use kind of taller plants, slightly taller plants. I'll talk about those later, amongst the rocks to act as a transition. So it will go from the really short hair grass up to a taller plant, and eventually you'll kind of get this all the plants are going to follow this kind of line here, like so. So first job, planting the hair grass. Now, top tip, if you're kind of limited on your plant quantity, then to make sure you get even coverage, is plant the extreme one end, and then the other. And then halfway in between, and then just keep repeating that. So you're planting halfway in between each portion, each section, and then you're guaranteed to get the most even coverage possible. Okay. Anybody want to help with planting? You look like a good couple that want to help. Yeah? What's your name?
Belinda.
Belinda. Nice to meet you, Belinda. A round of applause for Belinda. Ben and Ben. Okay, so the next plant we're going to use is Staragini repens. Again, it's the Tropica 1-2 grow, easy category. I think the yellow Icarus is the medium category. We talked about that earlier. This is going to be, like I said, a transitional plant. So we start off with the short hair grass at the front, and that leads up to the stones, which we're going to plant around the stones with the Staragini. This is a really pretty plant. It likes to be kind of trimmed to keep it nice and compact in bushes. And then it's kind of the same principle as to prepare it. So you don't get as many portions. Obviously, it's not a really small plant. but you can divide it up into individual kind of stems like this, and then exactly the same way as planting as before. Perfect. Do you want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice one. So grab your portion, grab your tweezers. Oh. And then pop it in around the stones. So you remember when we set the rocks up, we deliberately left a gap in between the stones. That's where we're going to put the Staragini. So I'm planting in between the stones, and what's going to happen is over time, the plant's going to kind of fill this gap in between, and then we can trim the plant, and it's going to create almost like a bushy effect. And if you remember right at the beginning of the demo, when I said we're going to, over time, we're going to create this sort of one solid kind of hill effect with the stone and then the kind of wood coming over. So when you trim, this is a stem plant basically, Staragini. When you trim it, oh, we've got to do it. No worries. Stick to the Staragini for now. Yeah. When you trim any stem plant, what will happen is where you trim it from, it will grow 2 new shoots, and you can use that to advantage to help create like a really nice bushy effect. So we're using a lot of plants here. You could get away with using less at home, but I would encourage you to plant super heavy, really densely. The more plants we have right at the start of the aquarium, the less chance of algae we get. Like I said, it's worth reiterating, the aquarium is always kind of a fight against algae. Algae and plants are always in competition with each other. The more plants we have, and the healthier those plants are, and the better they're growing, the less algae we get. So we start off with loads of plants. The healthiest plants we get, these are, I think, direct from Denmark, probably a day or so ago, so they're super fresh. They're going to give you the best chance of success. They've got a great substrate system. They've got really good lighting, good filtration. We're going to have CO2 in there. This is the recipe for success, basically. So do consider this with your aquariums at home, especially if you're setting up a new one, or you want to kind of upgrade your current system. Something I definitely recommend if you want to have the best chance. So I actually find the planting process really therapeutic. It's quite, repetitive. Some people might find it boring, but I think you get into like a zone and you maybe put some music on in the background and just enjoy it. It's kind of like mindfulness. You're only focused on that one thing. All of your external problems have disappeared, and it's just you and the plant and the aquarium, and this is a really beautiful thing. So just, kind of try to learn to enjoy it. And it's the same with maintenance. Aquarium maintenance, most people find it a chore. They don't want to do it. But I think one of the keys to success with a planted aquarium and an aquascape is to learn to enjoy the maintenance. Think of the gratification that you'll get by making that aquarium look clean and attractive, healthy for the fish, and then think of the enjoyment you'll get, when you can sit back and you can, you're experiencing this beautiful aquarium, and that's because you've maintained it. Yeah. So if you learn to enjoy that maintenance process, this is a key thing. So this is Cryptocorini Wenditii green, or is it just called Wenditii in the? We've got any empty pots? Yeah, Wenditii green. Super easy plant. This is a perfect kind of low-tech plant. If you've got low lighting, it will grow almost in any aquarium. Nice and slow, doesn't need much light, doesn't need CO2. Will benefit from a nutrient-rich substrate, so consider a soil, or again a regular substrate with the nutrition capsules. it will definitely benefit this plant. It has a very kind of robust root structure. It likes to take in a lot of nutrients through its roots. It will grow probably 15 to 20 centimetres tall, stays a nice kind of green colour, and doesn't tend to send out runners. It will tend to kind of grow from a rosette, so it will just kind of grow new leaves. For this reason, it's really low maintenance. It doesn't need trimming very often, probably every few months or so. You'll just remove a leaf just by peeling it away from the rootstock. But a really nice, easy plant that almost anyone can grow. Really, really super easy. Thank you so much for your help. Appreciate it. Thank you. Round of applause for Ben and Belinda, everyone. Hey. Okay, so you can kind of see it starting to take shape. We've got the mini hairgrass, the Eleocharis mini, around the front area here, leading over to the right. And then we've got the Staragine, that's this plant here. I'm going to fill up around the stones with the Staragine. And then I've just started over to the left here. You probably can't see the difference, but this is Cryptogorny Wendetii. This is going to grow to kind of here. And then I'll plant that all around the back as well. Okay, another consideration is your lighting. So around here, it's quite shaded. So I'm going to put the Cryptogorny here, the Crypt Wendetii green. This doesn't need a lot of light. It will grow almost in the dark. So we can put that there, and that's going to fill up that area nicely. And I know that's going to be fine with that low level of lighting. So this is another consideration when you're planting and choosing your plants. You know, make sure where you're putting those plants is going to get access to the appropriate light levels. So if you want inspiration on how to actually create a new aquascape, or you're not sure where to look or anything, I do recommend the Tropica website. It has lots of, if you look on the front page, there's an area called Inspiration, and it has a lot of layouts on there, and it has a complete kind of map, a planting map on there, so you can see what plants are used. It tells you what aquariums use, what fertilizers, what CO2, what lighting. So it can give you a really good insight into what that aquascape has done to create that layout. And then you can copy it if you wanted to. So we need some more planting around here, some more around here for the Staragine, some more around here, and then I'll plant the crypts, which are going to grow kind of taller around here and around here, and this is going to accentuate this kind of mound hill effect that we talked about earlier. And then after that, we will plant the epiphyte plants, which are the plants that are going to attach to the wood and in between the wood and the rocks, etc. So we'll plant the last of the Staragine. Cool. So when I first started the hobby, I used to think a 400-litre aquarium was absolutely massive. And then more recently, I've been doing bigger tanks. I helped to aquascape a 28,000-litre aquarium for a public zoo in Germany. Some of you that follow me on YouTube might have seen it. That was a real privilege, actually, to be involved with that project. Flown over to Germany, and I did a follow-up on it, and I actually got inside the aquarium with diving gear to help maintain it, which was pretty epic. And I was actually inside the tank and then looking out to all the public waving at you. It's crazy. And the biggest aquarium that I've ever kind of seen, it's the biggest planted, I think the biggest planted tank in the world, is Florestas Submersas, which is in Lisbon, in Portugal. And this was actually Takashi Amano's last aquarium that he ever made before he died. So there's a team of about 40 people involved. It's actually 40 meters long. It's like a U shape like this. And you walk in, it's completely dark, and the only thing that's lit up is the aquarium. And it has this specially composed music that was commissioned particularly for that exhibit. really kind of emotional classical music, and you walk in and it's just, you're completely surrounded by this epic nature aquarium, 40 meters long. Google it, just Google kind of, it's actually on my channel, but if you Google Florestas Submersas or Giant Nature Aquarium Lisbon or something like that, you'll find it. But it's mind-blowing. Crypts now. This is the final kind of rooted plant that we'll plant, and then we'll go on to the epiphyte plants. These are plants that will attach to the wooden rocks. And that's really going to transform the whole look of the aquarium. At the moment, it's still looking quite stark. It's obviously, you know, we're covering the soil nicely, but this is looking a bit kind of empty, and it will really kind of take on a new look fairly soon. So excellent. Okay, time for the epiphyte plants. My favourite plants because they're low maintenance. They don't need much light. Most of them will grow in a non-CO2 tank. They don't grow in the soil, so you could even get away with just using, if you're on a super low budget, you could get away with using them on a just a sand substrate because they don't actually go into the substrate. So what have we got? Bucophilandra, wavy green, and Java ferns. Okay. So Bucophilandra, this is a really interesting plant. Again, it's quite new to the hobby. It's actually endemic to Borneo, but it's now mass-produced in the nurseries in Europe, which is good because the jungles in Borneo are being decimated for palm oil production. So it's nice to not impact this kind of environment. So these are now produced in the European nurseries. Quite similar to Anubias. Some of you may have heard of Anubias. Doesn't need much light. Because it's a very slow grower, tends to get a little bit more algae on the leaves because it doesn't have that capability to fight off the algae. You can split it up into individual portions, or you can just keep it like this. I'm going to leave it like that for now. And what I'm going to do is kind of just wedge this into various areas amongst the wood and the rocks. You can actually glue it if you want to. You can use like a cyanacrylite super glue, which is a very kind of popular glue. Here we've got Secam Flourish here. This is like a gel type glue. The gel type's better because if you imagine using a liquid type and you want to glue it on a vertical surface, the liquid just kind of runs down, and when it dries like a bright white colour. So we use the gel type, which kind of is more sticky, and we can glue it. But I'm really lazy, and I just like to kind of wedge it. So we find a suitable place, and we just poke it in. And then over time, those roots are going to kind of naturally grow onto the wood and self-attach.
Will that plant spread itself?
It will grow, yeah, it'll super slow though. It'll probably grow one new leaf every 3 or 4 weeks, if that, depending on your lighting and your CO2, etc. It's a really slow grower, really low maintenance, but really quite beautiful, especially when it's mature. It's a very trendy plant. There's some really kind of, I don't know if any of you are into marine tanks, but there's a trend of zoas, and they come up with these crazy names for them. It's very similar with the Bucophilandra. They have, it's probably about 30 or 40 different kind of varieties of it, all different shapes and sizes, all different kind of sizes and colours. This is one of the most kind of common, the wavy green. But because it's such a new kind of species, they're called these kind of funny names, like wavy green. It's not really scientific. So let's pop that in there. This is Java fern. Many of you may have heard of Java fern, Microsorum terapus. This is actually like an XL pot here, so bigger than the usual. It's just been grown longer in the nurseries, basically. To prepare it, we just take the pot off, and then we take away this mineral wool. It's non-toxic. It doesn't really matter if you plant it with that in the aquarium, but it just doesn't look very nice. So remove as much of that as you can. And the great thing about Java fern, it's easy plant, doesn't need much light, adaptable to a wide range of water conditions. It's actually, apparently, it tastes bitter. I've never tried it. but fish don't like to eat it. So you can even keep it with like herbivorous fish. Apparently it's quite fish safe for like goldfish and other fish that tend to nibble plants. And again, what I like to do is normally just wedge it in. I'll do it at the end, but what I'm going to probably do is try to hide this this has been sawn off, but it looks unnatural at the moment. So what I'm going to do is kind of disguise it by popping those on there, so it really gives this kind of tree effect. We might have to glue it, or we might just be able to wedge it in there. But I'll do the Bucophilandra first. I'll just prepare these. When you start an aquarium, for instance, this aquarium here, it's brand new. The plants are brand new. They need to take time to adjust. The soil is going to be potentially leaching nutrients. The wood's going to maybe leach nutrients. So all this means that this is a kind of recipe for algae. So we really need to do huge water changes, especially in the early weeks. So this might sound a bit crazy, but I recommend at least a 50% water change every day for the first week, 50% every second day for the second week, every third day for the third week, and then after 4 weeks you can go to 150% every week, and then I'd maintain that 50% water change at least every week. A lot of people kind of try to argue with me and say that's too much, but it works for me, and the kind of methodologies that I promote, we're basically promoting really healthy plant growth, and what that means is the plants are actually growing so much that they're producing organic waste. And this organic waste kind of builds up in the water. It's a closed system, so it's got nowhere else to go. If this organic waste builds to a certain point, it's going to trigger algae. And the only real way, effective way that we can deal with this accumulation of organic waste is with these water changes. So basically, the more water changes we do, the better to limit this organic waste. The plants absolutely love the water changes. The fish do as well. Obviously, bear in mind temperature, water conditioners, etc., dechlorinator, do all your usual stuff, but don't be afraid to change more water. The worst thing you can do is not do enough water changes, because you will get algae. That's just a fact, trust me. I'll get it all the time because I don't do enough water changes. So that's the top tip, is the water changes. And then after maybe a couple of weeks or so, some people like to fertilise from day one, but I would add a good quality, comprehensive liquid fertiliser after maybe 2 weeks or so. And in this aquarium here, I'm probably using Tropica Specialised. This contains all of the plant nutrients that you need in one handy bottle. Some competitors will supply 5 or 6 different bottles to give you this whole spectrum of nutrients, but you can get it all in one bottle in an ideal ratio here. Really simple to use. It's a squirt dispensing bottle. This is a 400-litre aquarium. You can read the instructions. The Tropica instructions actually tell you to do it once per week. My advice, and what I do personally on my home tanks, and I recommend to clients, is to dose every day. You can get auto doses now, or just make it part of your daily routine. Maybe feed the plants when you feed the fish at the same time. And the plants will respond basically better to a smaller, more frequent dose than one large dose. So it's like us human beings. We tend to have 3 meals a day, spread over forever. If you imagine only having, one massive meal a week, a 100,000 calorie meal, once a week, it's not going to be very good for you. So similar kind of principle with the plants. Feed them once a day, do your water changes, and this is the key. If you've got fast-growing stem plants, they need to be trimmed. The Staragini repens, this is the only plant this is probably going to be the first plant that needs to be trimmed in here, and you're going to get more kind of bushy growth. The offshoots that when you cut off, these can be replanted if you want to, if you've got space in the aquarium to replant them. Otherwise, dispose of them or put them in another aquarium. You can propagate them, give them away to friends. One thing I would advise, absolutely insist on actually, is when you get rid of any live plants, make sure you get rid of them responsibly. Don't throw them in your local river. Don't flush them down the toilet. Put them in the compost or put them in your kind of general waste, but just dispose of them responsibly. Because if they get into the local waterways, they could potentially be invasive and start to smother waterways and cause all kind of environmental damage. A lot of the invasive plant problems that we have potentially due to lack of responsibility from us human beings. So just bear that in mind as well. Okay. Same with fish. Don't flush your fish down the toilet.
Can I ask about the maintenance?
Yeah.
How do you change actually the 50% or 80% water? Use tap water? And
Yeah, I use tap water. I actually have a spare external filter inlet, OASE, of course. Hooks over the side of the tank. The inlet strainer sits here, and I have a garden hose attached to that, and then that goes out to the garden, and then I siphon. And then I siphon at least half of the water. I normally change about 75% of the water myself. So I siphon and I water the plants in the garden with it, because this is environmentally responsible, of course. And then I get that end of, once it's down to 75%, I'll get the end, and then I actually attach it to a submersible pump. I put that pump in my kitchen sink, and then I fill the sink up, and the sink's filling at the same time, the same rate as that water is being pumped into the aquarium. And then at the beginning of that process, I'll add some dechlorinator, and then I use a special red colander. This will kind of sit like this, and I have the water going in here, and that disperses, make sure it doesn't disturb the soil or the plants, and then I can just chill out and watch that fill up nice and slow. If you follow me on Instagram, there's a few time lapses of me doing this. George Farmer Studios.
When you do that, you add the chlorinator to aquarium to that 20% of water, or you add it to the bucket that you
I just put it in the tank. Yeah. So, my chlorine level at home is very low, so it's just not really an issue. You can just add it at the beginning of the process in the aquarium. It's fine.
So it's not an issue if it's going to be too much.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to make it as less. I used to use buckets. Can you imagine like a 10-litre bucket? 50%, 200 litres. That's 20 buckets to and from. So yeah, try to automate the process as much as you can. Try to make it easy for yourself. Try to save you back. And yeah, if you can make the maintenance easy, then you're going to be more likely to do it more often. And that's the key to succeeding within a planted aquarium in particular. The more maintenance you do, the better it looks. The less algae you get, the better plant growth you get, and you get this kind of positive cycle of enjoyment, because you're enjoying the aquarium, you're enjoying the maintenance process, and you end up with something that's healthy and beautiful and algae-free. That's the key. What else can I talk about maintenance? Lighting. So we won't talk about lighting levels and stuff. This is quite complex. The lighting that comes supplied with the aquarium will be more than likely to grow any of the easy category tropical plants. I always tend to go for 6 to 8 hour photo periods. I normally use 6 hours at the beginning of an aquascape's life for the first few weeks, and then I'll go up to 8 hours after 4 weeks or so. If you have the ability to, if you've got particularly kind of high-tech lighting that can be ramped up and down, you can kind of start off with like a 50% lighting for the first few weeks as the plants kind of adjust. You'll get less likely algae issues, and then you can ramp up to 100% after 4 weeks or so. But I rarely go more than 8. You shouldn't need to go more than 8 hours photo period. It tends to encourage algae. Some people like to split the photo period. They'll go like 4 hours on, a couple of hours off, then 4 hours on. This is okay, but in my experience, plants tend to respond better to a consistent photo period. If you're using CO2 injection, this is quite another complex topic, but if you do use CO2 injection, I would advise have it come on a good couple of hours before the lights come on. This means the CO2 is going to build up to a level where the plants can use that CO2 as soon as the lights come on. The trouble is, if the CO2 comes on at the same time as the lights, the CO2 levels actually take quite a while to build up in the aquarium water. So this is going to potentially give you algae, because the lights are trying to grow the plants, but there's not enough CO2. So have that CO2 come on before the lights, and then you normally have the CO2 go off maybe just before the lights go off, so the plants can use that residual CO2 level. Hopefully that makes sense. CO2 maybe after the actual demo, if anyone wants a tutorial on CO2, we can do that afterwards. So we talked about nutrients, we talked about CO2, water changes, filters for those. So most of you hopefully saw the demo on how to clean the the OASE pre-filter. I'll do it again just because I love doing it so much. We can take the filter out on the sliding shelf here, and then we lock it off here. This is the pre-filter. That just pops out like that. Undo these locking tabs here. Go over to your sink. You can take these sponges off. That just slides out of like a spray bar, which is along here. Rinse these under your tap water. This isn't biological media, so you can rinse it under your tap water, no problem. Give them a good squeeze under the running tap water, make them nice and clean. Pop that back on there, and then just reverse that process, and that is the filter cleaned. So this prevents excess kind of debris getting inside the biological media here. So you don't need to clean this out very often at all. I wouldn't recommend it, but I've gone 2 years without taking this apart. The thing that I'm worried about, you will need to take it apart eventually because the impeller, the thing that kind of pumps the water, will eventually get coated in a load of kind of organic waste, so that needs cleaning. And then to put it back again, you've got a keyway here, you've got a slot there, lines up with the keyway, lock that off. Obviously turn your filter off and your heater off. It's got a built-in heater as well. Turn those off before you maintain it, of course. Slide it back, turn them back on again, and that's it. Filter's done. And that is one of the main reasons I love Biomaster so much. There's no other filter that has the combination of the pre-filter and the heater built in. And the pre-filter is great. It has 3 different filter sponge sizes. So you have a fine, medium, and a coarse, depending on your stocking levels, etc., how much you want to polish that water. The finer the sponge, the more quickly it will clog up, and you will notice a reduction in flow. This is just part of. Don't worry about it. It's just telling you that the filter is doing its job. So just keep it clean and maintain that flow rate. And they also do a carbon sponge as well. So if you want to really get that high water clarity, use the carbon. Okay. So I would clean the pre-filter in there once a week. Make it part of your kind of weekly maintenance process. And that's another important topic, is kind of scheduling, however you say schedule, your maintenance, once a week at least. Make it part of your kind of weekly routine. A lot of people like to do it on the weekend because they're obviously not working, maybe. And just try to keep it, make it a habit. If you do it enough times in a row, it will become a habit. It will become second nature. You'll learn to enjoy it, and this is a really important part of the hobby. If you can enjoy maintaining the aquarium, you're going to make sure it looks good all the time. You get that reward of knowing that you've made that aquarium look nice and clean, nice and healthy. The fish are healthy, the plants are healthy. You haven't got any algae, and you can sit down and you can be quite smug with yourself and think, yes, I did that. That aquarium looks beautiful, and it's because of me. Yeah, not me, you. You know what I mean? Good. But maintenance is the key, obviously, to keeping an aquarium looking good. Okay, so let's attach the rest of the Bucophilandra. And just wedge it in almost randomly, as if nature has been doing it. We could use mosses as well on here. Mosses can be higher maintenance, depending on the system that you're running. Some mosses will grow quicker than others. When you trim mosses, they tend to sink, and they can kind of get amongst the carpeting plants. This can actually look quite nice. But I tend to add mosses kind of once the aquarium is a bit more mature. They tend to kind of get algae amongst the moss in a new aquarium. So I would usually add them after a couple of months or so, once the aquarium is like really settled in. If you do want to grow moss, I definitely recommend keeping shrimp. Shrimp love to kind of graze amongst the moss. They don't actually eat the moss. They eat the biofilm, which is like the natural kind of bacteria and microorganisms that live amongst the moss. And this helps to keep the moss clean, which helps in turn to prevent algae. I really love cherry shrimp. Cherry shrimp will breed really easily, especially in harder water. And although they're not the best algae eaters, they tend to help prevent the algae because they're eating this biofilm, which is like a prerequisite to the algae. So by stocking, you buy sort of 10, 15 cherry shrimp, and then they'll breed, and you'll end up with hundreds, and they're crawling over everything, keeping everything nice and clean. Amano shrimp, very good algae eater. They're a little bit more expensive than cherry shrimp, and they won't breed in fresh water, but they are the best algae eater. And I would recommend stocking a few Amano shrimp at least, just to keep on top of not even keep on top of the algae, but to help prevent the algae. We're talking about preventative maintenance rather than corrective maintenance. So we want to be preventing the algae from occurring rather than treating it. The ideal situation is that you won't get it in the first place. And if you follow all the advice that I've just said about the maintenance, investing in the right equipment, the right amount of plants, make sure those plants are healthy and there's enough of them, make sure you're using appropriate lighting, nutrients, circulation, filtration, CO2 if you've got it, get all these things dialed in right at the start, and you're going to get the best plant growth and hopefully no nuisance algae growth. Hey, Anubias, one of my favourite plants, epiphyte plant again, so it attaches to the decor, doesn't need much light, doesn't need CO2 injection, super slow grower, so it's low maintenance. Can potentially grow algae on the leaves again because it is a slow grower, doesn't have the ability to fight the algae off. Ideally, you'd plant it amongst the shade. And then I'm just going to, similar process to before, going to kind of wedge it in. I'm going to actually go down here so it's a little bit more shaded. Fun fact for you, Anubias is named after I can never remember if it's the Greek god or the Roman god, Anubis. Does anyone know? Yeah, is it Greek or Roman? Or Egyptian?
Yeah, Egyptian.
Egyptian. Yeah. Anyway, it's a god. Anubis is death. And it's named after that because it can grow in the dark. Dark death. There you go. Every day is a school day. Yeah, I tend to run my aquariums a little bit cooler, on the cooler side. So I do your research, see what temperatures your fish, is most suitable, and then go for that lower range. So if they can do 24 to 28, I would do the 24. This is to basically, the warmer the water, the higher all the biological processes, the quicker the biological processes. We call this the metabolic rates. So the higher the temperature, the more waste is being produced, the hungrier the fish get, so you need to feed more food, so more waste is being produced. It's almost like a vicious circle. So by lowering the water temperature, it lowers everything. It lowers the fish respiration, it lowers the plant growth, so you get less waste production, you get more manageable plant growth, you get less likely algae growth, you get more oxygen. Oxygen levels are inversely proportional to the temperature. So the cooler the water, the more oxygen, the better oxygen levels, the more efficient the bacteria are working, the happier the fish are, and actually the happier the plants are. Plants actually do thrive in higher oxygen levels as well. Java fern. But I am aware that we need to weigh this rock down. So what I'm going to do, try to kill two birds with one stone, literally.